Hey folks, David Stewart here. Hope you guys are having a great day. Let's talk a little bit about gaming, how gaming lost its way. If this is a long video, I apologize because there's a lot of ground to cover. I'm going to talk about 5 large areas, including what you guys might be thinking of, like the elephant in the room. But before I get to that, let me set the stage about where gaming was. What was peak gaming? Was gaming actually better in the past? I actually think it was. I made a video about 10 years ago about my declining interest in video games. And my conclusion I came to, even though everyone was like, you're just getting old, is like, no, games have actually been getting worse. And they've actually been getting worse in the 10 years since then. But I had been recognizing trends that had been going on for, at that point, 5 years, and were really kind of sucking the fun out of the medium and making games just not as high a quality as they were several years before that. So let's take a trip back to the 2000s. I think the 2000s, the mid 2000s, really was the peak of gaming as an art form, gaming as an experience for people who love the hobby of gaming. There was a lot going on that made gaming really special, really unique, really fun at that time. I've talked about in the past how I think 2007 was the peak of gaming. I called it Gaming Ground Zero. There was a number of giant releases that came out either between, let's say, between 2006 and 2008. Some of the biggest franchises began, like Assassin's Creed, Mass Effect, and you had major entries into the franchise, various franchises that really set the tone for those franchises going forward. Big one is Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare, which became the format for Call of Duty even to this day. 20 years later, you have Call of Duty is the same as it was in 2007. In the mid 2000s, you had MMOs as a large force in gaming. They were novel. They were still novel, even though they'd been around at that point for 10 years. But they really were peaking in 2007. 2007 was the year of Burning Crusade. So you had World of Warcraft that came out in 2004, Burning Crusade, Wrath of the Lich King. You had Final Fantasy 11 was still live and patching. EverQuest was still live and patching. And these games were really good. Dark Age of Camelot was still around. So you had some incredibly amazing MMO games. It was the peak of MMOs. You also had the Xbox Live culture. You had Halo. The Halo trilogy came out in the early 2000s. So we're talking some of the biggest, best games ever. God of War 1, 2, and 3. The biggest and best games that have ever been released were released around that time. Oblivion in 2006 really set the stage for how Elder Scrolls and indeed open world Bethesda games would be following that game. The 2000s were really special because of how good the games were. We really took it for granted. We thought that games were always going to keep getting better. Everything was going to keep looking better. It was going to keep playing better. There was going to be better gameplay, more options. We thought World of Warcraft would just keep getting more epic and better forever. Turns out that wasn't the case. And we had a big decline after about 2010, really across the board. And there was a lot of things that caused that decline. But if you want to go back to the 2000s really were amazing because gaming was an escape, gaming was fun, gaming was social, gaming was new, gaming was exciting. It was a great time for the industry. So how did we lose our way? Well, the first big area is actually DLC and microtransactions. I'm grouping these together. A lot of times I ask people, if there's one thing you could take away from gaming to make it better, what would it be? My thought really goes to DLC, but people bring up microtransactions because DLC is one thing, but microtransactions are a lot worse. I think they're both really bad. I think a game should ship in a complete state. I am willing to allow DLC in the form of like large expansions like Brood War, right? Or like Shivering Isles or something like that, that really makes the game much bigger. It's something that is a whole complete thing added to a whole complete thing, not, like Warcraft 2 Beyond the Dark Portal, an expansion pack, Ghostbusters Legacy, whatever expansion pack comes to mind when you're thinking of a great expansion for a game. That to me is a little bit different than what we got with DLC, which was here's a Dragon Age Origins mission that will take 20 minutes to complete and is $7.99. Here's your horse armor DLC for Oblivion, $5.99 or whatever, to put armor on your horse until you get a new horse, or whatever it's going to be. So microtransactions are just DLC kind of to the extreme. Do you want a cosmetic? Do you want some health packs? Do you want some XP boosts? Microtransactions and DLC are the worst thing to happen to gaming, really, of all the things that I'm going to talk about. And it took away the idea of the game as a complete thing, and it turned the end user, turned the player into a resource to be milked as much as possible, right? DLC is really low effort compared to putting out an entire game, but you can charge a lot more for it. If you're thinking 20 minutes of gameplay for $4.99 versus 100 hours of gameplay for $49.99, DLC is really where the money is. A cosmetic doesn't take that long to design. You can sell it for $5 or $10. It's just really profitable to do microtransactions. And that influenced and really destroyed the possibilities of what mobile gaming could be. Nowadays, anybody who's serious about games does not think of mobile gaming when they think of gaming. They think of consoles, they think of PC. They're not thinking about people playing gacha games on their phone, because the microtransactions influence the game design. That's really what happens. That's the problem. It's not just, it's an optional, cosmetic or something. The game design becomes influenced by how you monetize it. How you try to make money in that game is going to determine how the game ends up being designed. So the coolest cosmetics are going to be sold. Cosmetics used to be about character progression in World of Warcraft. If you can just buy the cosmetics, then that eliminates a huge kind of piece of drip that you would have, a bragging, an obvious bragging rights that you would have to noobs, that you had great gear on and you could walk around with that great gear on, that sort of thing. But all the way across the board, mobile games are designed to milk you using microtransactions. They're not designed to be fun really in the absence of those things. And those microtransactions often become mandatory. If you want to compete, you have to buy the XP boosts. You have to buy the booster packs for Hearthstone or whatever other game you might be playing that has some gacha element in it. You have to be committing to getting those microtransactions, getting those items so that you can compete. It's really not optional. It's sort of like if someone says, well, you don't like flying, you thought flying was a bad design decision in World of Warcraft, just don't buy a flying mount. Okay, that's not really an option. You have to use it for some certain things in the game. The game's designed around it. After it enters the design, it influences the iteration of the design going forward. That's a fact. Number 2 is live service games. So I mentioned the peak of MMOs and online play, Xbox Live. That was a real escape in the 2000s. It was really fun to go online. It was an escape from real life. Now it's more like real life just follows you into the online world. It's not nearly as fun to play World of Warcraft anymore. You feel like you're being watched like a hawk. And I feel like that's, really across the board. But when I talk about the bad influence of live service games, even now Sony is saying we're going to keep doing live service games because we think they bring all this kind of value, even though they've been producing real stinkers in the live service game area. But what happened is the industry saw how much money Blizzard was making with World of Warcraft with 10 million subscribers, paying $15 a month to play that game. And they're like, well, the revenue coming in is insane. So live service games need to be where it's at, because that's where we can milk the player the hardest, whether it's through microtransactions or a subscription service. If they're only playing our game all the time, then we really can monetize them heavily. Each player becomes a whale. Instead of selling one game a year, if you're a company and you make one game at a time, you can sell that one game to a bunch of gamers at $50, or you could be World of Warcraft and sell 15 times 12 to get someone to play for an entire year. Obviously, live service appears to be much more profitable. The problem with live service, of course, is that, again, it influences game design so that the game really is not about a complete experience, not a piece of art you could put on the shelf and revisit years later, but something that can only be experienced at the time. A lot of times the companies lean hard on fear of missing out. You got to play now or you're going to miss out on this great experience. And most of the experiences are just not that great. We have to be honest about it. And while you're making a live service game, it actually is going to displace the industry. If your company's making a live service game, it's going to displace other games that you might be making. Whether you're focusing on World of Warcraft and therefore there's no Warcraft 4, or StarCraft 2 doesn't get as much attention, and Blizzard's a big company. They can do a lot of things, but there's only so many resources to go around. When you're focusing on Elder Scrolls Online, we're still waiting for Elder Scrolls 6. That hasn't come out. Your company can only do one thing at a time. While you're doing Destiny or Destiny 2, you're not focusing on the next Bungie game. So live service games can be a real albatross, and we're seeing that more now that people are just not willing to quit the game that they're playing now to play a new live service game. It's a crowded market. It's very difficult to make inroads. And the main thing is it just harmed both multiplayer experiences as well as single player experiences over the long run. Okay. So live service, making every game a live service game. Forced multiplayer was a thing about 10 years ago. All the games had an extra multiplayer component. Why? Because they thought every game should be a live service game. Every game should have multiplayer in it, online multiplayer of some kind. They had a Dragon Age game with online multiplayer. It's like, I don't know what they were thinking. Well, they were thinking that they could somehow turn every game into a World of Warcraft behemoth or a Call of Duty behemoth that would make them all kinds of stacks of cash, but it hasn't really worked out that way. Number 3 is gaming became a big business. It went from a business, it's always been a business, but it went from a business area where it was driven by enthusiasts, both on the gamer side and in the game development side. Real enthusiasts, people that loved the medium, people that loved games, people that were really passionate about it. And it went from small teams of passionate creators to big, giant teams of big businesses with huge, gigantic budgets. And whenever you have a gigantic budget, you have to try to recoup that investment. So your ROI becomes more essential, I suppose. So as the ROI becomes more important, you also lose innovation, you lose originality. And so the big business thing has transformed the industry into something that is about market research. Let's figure out this market niche and we'll make a game for it, rather than game devs who are excited to try a new thing. They have a cool idea. Wouldn't it be cool if we did this? And people can, kind of see where the chips fall. But there was a lot more originality, I would say, mid 2000s and before. A lot more original ideas came out than after that. After that, it became all about copying whatever was the most popular franchise. And games really started to be lists of features. They were a list of features and not being designed in a holistic sense. So if you wanted to have an MMO, you would just copy the feature list from WoW. You wouldn't think about all the things that made WoW really fun or engaging. You'd be like, okay, well, we got to have leveling, and we got to have some gear, and we got to have some crafting, and we need to have some like fast travel, and we need to have an auction house, and we need to have quests. And so you just have this list of things that the game has to have. And so you put those in the game, and then no one plays the game. They don't enjoy it. Like, what happened? We spent $50 million, $100 million, whatever, making this game, and no one bought it. But it had all the features, and we not only did all the features, we made them even better. It's like you forgot what made the original game compelling. You didn't see that it was about the passion that made those quests fun or silly or original or whatever. You turned it into a Skinner box to try to extract money from people rather than making it a fun and exciting experience from a gamer's perspective. A lot of the old devs for these games, they were gamers first. They played their own games. They didn't just, have some idea of game theory that they were going to use to monetize a game. And they weren't just kind of one guy, one cog in a giant machine making art that his boss told him to make. They were passionate people. And so as the business got bigger, the originality, the innovation started to get stripped out. It's not that there's no new or original games coming out at all. That's not the case at all. But if you're thinking of the big stuff, like the stuff that used to really drive system sales, there's a lot more original ideas, say, before the PS3 than the PS3 and afterwards. I think we have to be honest about how that's panned out. And I think the big budgets and all of that is the main culprit there. And number four, the fourth big area, is the emphasis of graphics over gameplay. Now, if you go really far back, graphics have been essential to the progress of games. They've been essential to marketing consoles and marketing games. Graphics are a big deal. You couldn't have Super Mario Brothers unless you had graphics, and unless you had graphical improvement over the Atari. Basically, being able to scroll a level was a new thing for the NES, for those 8-bit computers. So if you didn't have any graphical improvement, you wouldn't have games like Super Mario Brothers that were able to take advantage of that improved graphics by having new and original gameplay. So there is a relationship between graphics and gameplay. Graphics enable gameplay to happen. They don't just exist in a vacuum. But what's happened, I would say, since 2007, since the release of the PS3 and the Xbox 360, is most of the industry has, especially in the West, it's not like this everywhere, and there's some big counterexamples to this, but there's been an increasing emphasis on graphical fidelity over gameplay. That's what's used to sell the systems. That's what's used to sell the games. And so it all becomes about, like the current thing is ray tracing. Ray tracing is the biggest nothing burger of technical innovation that I've ever experienced in gaming. It's not that ray tracing can't ever be noticed. Has it improved games? Has it made games more fun? It hasn't. Has it made them play better? It hasn't. Has it made them look better? It's debatable. It's debatable. I mean, a little bit. And then you're like, it does look a little better, but is it worth the insane increase in hardware requirements to deliver that lighting? I don't know. You be the judge. I think it has turned out to really not be worth it as far as a technology that's been sold. We still have some technological innovation, right? We've had VR. We had the PSVR, PSVR 2 in the console space. We've had the Oculus Rift. We've had a lot of innovation. That was the last big technological innovation in gaming, and people didn't buy into it as much as they did previous things. So there's still some technical innovation, but it's mostly about like the graphics. Is this sharper? Is it higher resolution? All that kind of stuff. And so what gets lost in the process is the fun of the game and the game design. And again, you only have so many resources. So if you're putting all of your resources into making the graphics as good as possible, then you're not going to be emphasizing how important the gameplay is, how smooth the gameplay is, how innovative it is. That becomes a lesser priority versus the graphics. Now, there's some big counterexamples. A big one would be Nintendo. Nintendo purposefully in the mid-2000s stepped out of the graphical fidelity rat race and instead shipped basically souped up GameCube, a last-gen console with motion controls to have a fun gameplay kind of gimmick. And while you look back on it and the motion controls weren't that good, it was at least something different and original. And VR was something different and original, even if you're not super into VR. But the mainstream space has been pretty intensely focused on graphics over all other things. And nowadays, every time I hear an announcement from a gaming company, it's about Unreal Engine 5 or it's about some graphical thing. And rather than showing this is going to be really fun to play and there's some really innovative gameplay things going on, I just never see the innovation on the gameplay side as a result of it. Obviously, the Nintendo Switch 2, they're lower graphical fidelity than the PS5 or Xbox Series X. But there wouldn't be a Switch 2 if there wasn't a need for better graphics and better fidelity, And then the last area, this is the elephant in the room. I think it's actually not as important as people think it is. That is DEI, that is politics, that is Anita Sarkeesian. It is all of the negative stuff that's been inserted into the gaming space that's sucked a lot of the fun out of talking about games and having just games be a fun escape from the real world. Like I said, back in the 2000s, it was already really oppressive, especially if you were in college, because colleges were already fully like communist converged back then. You couldn't say anything edgy. But you went online and all of a sudden you could be yourself. You could express unorthodox opinions, let's say. We'll say unorthodox. Well, you could express politically incorrect thoughts online with your friends, and you just had a better opportunity to be yourself in World of Warcraft behind the mask of an orc than you did in real life at your school talking to real people. That's the way that culture was. So online games were a huge escape. That's been completely subverted now to where online is more like the real world, and it's completely oppressive, and it's really hard to go online and have anything other than like a full socialist leftist point of view and exist online, right? All of your thoughts will be anathema to the people who control the online spaces. And unfortunately, gaming has fallen to that, right? Gaming has been severely influenced by politics to the detriment of the games, to the detriment of the graphics. Talk about ugly girls, right? You see, why are they taking pretty actresses and making them ugly when they put them in the game? That's one of the current controversies. Why is this character worse looking than she was last gen? Why did they make her fatter to make her more realistic? It's an artistic space. We want an idealization. That's a whole nother discussion. But the point is, people sense that they're not doing this for realism. They're doing this because they dislike that men enjoy ideal human female bodies. The messaging that exists in the game. You have Sweet Baby Inc. influencing all of the messaging that's in the game and making the stories worse. Remember, forced diversity always comes at the expense of the story, right? Politics getting inserted into the story makes the story weaker. So you have this great new medium called gaming, and you have it really suppressed in terms of its potential quality by politics. All of that is true. That's probably what you were thinking of when you first turned on this video. Do I think it's the biggest thing? No, I think if you took that out, if you completely banished all the woke people from gaming, you took the gaming journos and you got rid of them so that they could never type again, they can never speak again, they're never talking about games again, and you got rid of Sweet Baby Inc. and you got rid of all of the politics and just let people make games, you would still have those other four things that I talked about, okay? You would still have the problem of microtransactions. You would still have the problem of live service games mucking everything up and sucking, and making it so that if you want to play a multiplayer game, it's like you just can't play any other game. You won't be able to compete. You won't be able to have time to do other things by design. Big budgets that make everything a repeat, a list of features, and not a holistic, fun gaming experience. And then you still have this emphasis of graphics and things like that. So you still have major problems. But the DEI is a big problem. Okay, it's not the only problem. The DEI did not cause microtransactions. It didn't do that, but it is a big problem, and it's one that's made the gaming space really not fun. It used to be an escape, and it's not an escape anymore. And that's a big deal about how you feel about games. Even if the games were crappy, but you felt like you could somehow be yourself, it'd be a lot more fun. It would just be so much more fun. No, it wouldn't be as fun as it was in the 2000s, but you would at least not feel like you have to look over your back or you're going to lose your account or something by saying some little thing that's a little bit out of line for the politically correct line, if you know what I mean. So that's my thought. That's where we ended up. And these are the big reasons for why I think we ended up here. I'm not going to give you solutions for how to fix these because I think that's beyond the scope of this video, but I just wanted to talk about how we went from the peak to where we are now. Now, is there a complete loss of everything good? No, there's still great games coming out. There's still systems that ship great games. There's still great gaming companies out there still doing really good stuff, both in the AAA space and especially in the independent space. There's a lot more crap than there's ever been before, though, too. So you have to kind of weigh those things. And if you're looking for, like, I want to return to the days of being able to, like, play Halo 3 on Xbox Live, I can't tell you how you can get those days back. I don't know how you're going to get those days back, and I don't think they'll come back. And that reason is because we've gone through all of these processes that have fundamentally changed the hobby into something different from what it is. But I would love to hear your thoughts, so leave them down below. Thanks for hanging out with me in this rather long video. My Patreon is linked down below. I have exclusive stories that are only available on Patreon. Otherwise, you can buy the books on Amazon, as well as check out my music channel. You can listen to all my music for free there, or you can buy it zulonline.com. And I'll see you all next time. Have a great day.